You got this stretchy belt. Got to make sure that stays on there. All right. Good morning, everybody. What a great morning it is. It's good to see so many good faces back over the break. Um, we've got our good friends that were at their football camp. They're all back. Let's give them a big hand. Glad to have them back. I want Parker Schultz to come up here. He's going to read Hebrews 2 for us. So let's give Parker Schultz. Parker's a guy that you kind of want to introduce like a starting lineup. Parker, 6'4" from Heston, Kansas, junior, playing whatever position you need him to. Here he is, Hebrews 2.
All right.
Let's all stand together. Let's stand up. He's just going to read it. This is what we're going to talk about. But let's let the word of God just be spoken up over our lives today.
Therefore, we must pay much closer attention to what we have heard, lest we drift away from it. For since the message declared by angels proved to be reliable, and every transgression or disobedience received a just retribution, how shall we escape if we neglect such a great salvation? It was declared at first by the Lord, and it was attested to us by those who heard. While God also bore witness by signs and wonders and various miracles, and by gifts of the Holy Spirit distributed according to his will. For it was not to angels that God subjected the world to come, of which we are speaking. It has been testified somewhere, what is man, that you are mindful of him, or the Son of Man, that you care for him? You made him for a little while lower than the angels. You have crowned him with glory and honor, putting everything in subjection under his feet. Now, in putting everything in subjection to him, he left nothing outside his control. At present, we do not yet see everything in subjection to him, but we see him who, for a little while, was made lower than the angels, namely Jesus, crowned with glory and honor because of the suffering of death, so that the grace of God he might taste death for everyone. For it was fitting that he, for whom and by whom all things exist, and bringing many sons to glory, should make the founder of their salvation perfect through suffering. For he who sanctifies and those who are sanctified all have one source. That is why he is not ashamed to call them brothers, saying, I will tell of your name to my brothers. In the midst of the current congregation, I will sing your praise. And again, I will put my trust in him. And again, behold, I am the children God has given me. Since therefore the children share in flesh and blood, he himself likewise partook of the same things, that through death he might destroy the one who has the power of death, that is, the devil, and deliver all those who through fear of death were subject to lifelong slavery. For surely it is not angels that he helps, but he helps the offspring of Abraham. Therefore he had to be made like his brothers in every aspect, so that he might become a merciful and faithful high priest in the service of God, to make propitiation for the sins of the people. For because he himself has suffered when tempted, he is able to help those who are being tempted.
All right. Good job. Thank you. Go ahead and be seated. Thank you, Parker. Hebrews 2, there it is right there for us. So, the essence of Hebrews is really that the revelation about Jesus is superior because Jesus is a superior revelation. And here, the red letter originally was written to these Hebrew believers around 60 AD, and they had become suffering persecution and somewhat of having their expectations about the timing of Jesus and things like that were coming into question. And so they were losing faith a little bit. They were being tried and tested in their faith. And some of them were being tempted to go back to Judaism. And so this letter was written by an author that we don't know, we're not clear or sure who wrote it, but it was written to these group of Hebrews who were believers to encourage them to not go back, because what are you going back to? You have the thing that is superior. You have the revelation that is of of superior quality, and it's better than the law, and it's better than it comes from Jesus, better than delivered by angels. And so we're going to look a bit at this a little bit, but understanding a little what we have. And so Hebrews 2 verse 1 starts out with somewhat of an encouragement, like a mandate. It says, therefore, we must pay closer attention to what we have heard, lest we drift away from it. And when you just think about that, we must pay much closer attention. Now, I just want to be honest with you. It's a question that I think we need to ask is, how can we pay attention to anything right now, right? How can we pay attention to anything when there is so much trying to grab our attention? Constantly trying to grab our attention. There's so much information. It's just so much. It's like, okay, wait, what am I supposed to be paying attention to? What am I supposed to be listening to? And I think this is the challenge in the modern age, is to be able to slow ourselves down and to find out and distinguish the difference between the signal versus the noise. The signal versus the noise. So you have to start thinking about this as a human being, as a follower of Jesus. You just have to take your life serious. Why? Why do you have to take your life serious? Because your life is important, right? Your life has meaning. You're not an accident. You're not a quirk of evolutionary fate. You were designed and you were created by God for God, that your life is important, that you have a significant part to play in God's plan. There's no mistakes. It's just amazing. You know, many of you know, we have a little 8-year-old foster son, soon to be, well, is he 9 now? He's 9. He just had a birthday. A 9-year-old foster son. And we just found out his name is Shamar. His name is Shamar. And we're like, we have no idea what Shamar means. What's Shamar? Wait, never heard of that name, but, but come to find out, we had someone do a clinic here for us with some Hebrew Jewish background. And he said, Shamar, actually, he used this term in this little conference that he was doing. And the word Shamar means to look out for your brothers, to take, attention and look out for your brothers. And I just was like, whoa, how this little guy, he wants to be in law enforcement. And if you looked at his background and where his family background and think, how do you get to law enforcement? It's like, that doesn't seem like but he was created by God, for God, and that destiny. And so today he's out there riding around with the walkie-talkie, with that golf cart, looking out for his brothers and his sisters. So you just think about that, but we got to understand the difference between signal and noise. The distinction between signal and noise is between meaningful information, the signal, meaningful information that is important that you pay attention to, that through it can change your life. Meaningful information, and the irrelevant or distracting data, which hits home, because this week I didn't realize that this was what was going to happen, but I was called to come to the dialysis center where I go and I get supplies for they take my blood. They're to do an analysis and all this kind of stuff, and trained how to do the home dialysis. And so I show up, and the next thing I know, I'm in this chair, and all of a sudden these people start coming in to this little room patient room that I'm in, and it's like first it's the nurse, then it's the nephrologist, then it's the social worker, then it's the nutritionist, and they're sitting there, and they're with their mask on and white coats, and they start giving me all this data, like your phosphorus is high, and blah 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 blah. I was just like, oh my God, what? What's going on? And it's just all this data. They were checking it off. Yes, we told them about that. We told them about this. And I left, and I was like, that was unhelpful. That was so unhelpful. It's like phosphorus. It's like one data point in my whole entire body. You mean I can be summed up as a human being as your phosphorus is high? I don't think so, because I got some other things that are, want to say something about that phosphorus being high. So, it's just interesting. But our lives are like that. We're just bombarded with this level of information. And then it's quite different that I had a conversation with a doctor from New Zealand. And I just want you to know that, we're in the middle of a medical reformation. COVID has taken the lid off the medical establishment's hold on advancement of medical ingenuity, which is powerful. It's powerful. And if you need to understand that I'm not talking about Robert F. Kennedy Jr. or anything politics or anything like that. I'm just talking because what they did during COVID, the fact that they proved to be untrustworthy, has opened the lid for people to investigating real science and opening up potential for healing and health and a way of re-looking at the human body. About the stigma that there's the current stigma of they're almost like just the way they think about the human body needs to have a great humility that we do not know what the human body is. We don't even understand how it works. We don't understand the miracle of the human body. And when we begin to be so confident that we know that what everything's going on in the human body and begin to dictate to other people what they should do, we err greatly. And I think because of that, in the last 4 or 5 years, it's opened up the potential that God is providing resources to human beings to see healing come into their bodies. We're realizing we've been poisoned for the last 50 years in America. The food we eat, the things we've been told, it's okay, fortified with the essential vitamins. Yeah, meanwhile, toxic stuff in there with the food dyes and all of that stuff. I mean, I'm not trying to get on a platform, although I'm on a platform, and I'm not trying to preach, even though I am preaching, but it's the realization. So I'm talking to this doctor who's in New Zealand, and just to give you an example, I'm not giving him medical advice. I don't give medical advice, but he had an appendicitis. And of course, man, we're just trained. Appendicitis, you got to rush, 100 miles an hour because you got to, have it and got to have an appendectomy. Because if you don't have that appendectomy, and I'm not saying you shouldn't go there and get an appendectomy, I'm just telling you what he did. He had read where you can take, what is it that he took, Pam? Castor oil on a cloth, stuck it over his appendix, and fasted. You'll have to ask him what happened after that. No, it healed it. No appendectomy. Now, I'm just saying, am I advising that be the case? No, I'm not. I'm just saying that when he told me that, I started thinking about how, man, I've been locked into thinking about things in a way, conditioned, that I don't know for sure that the way I've been trained to think about these things is the most accurate way to think about them. Now, that might make you uncomfortable, that might make you think, oh my gosh, what's the deal? But you know what? that's when you put your life in and you begin to draw near to Jesus. You put your life in Jesus's hands. So, but in my conversation with this doctor early on, I was describing my condition, and I said something. Now, well, I was going to make a statement, and I prefaced it by saying, "Well, I'm not a doctor." And I said something. He goes, "Whoa, wait. Why are you?" And this is what he said. "Why are you giving your power away? Why are you giving your power away?" And I didn't know what he meant by that. And I asked him, what did you mean by that? And he told me, it's like you give the power that God has given to you over your body, over the things that make sense to you, and you just give that power away, and you give it to somebody else. And he said, look, you're going to have to start taking back your power. And so that was something meaningful, something that got my attention, and I paid attention to that for the last several months. And I believe that because of that and some other things, that God is doing something in my body that wouldn't have done otherwise. And I just want us to think about that. Now, there's humility needed in that, but I want you to think about your life, that we just want to give ourselves to a system. We want to just, the government's going to take care of us, right? Or, if something's sick, I can kind of eat whatever I want. And, if I get sick, I just take myself to the hospital and show up and tell them to fix me. Well, that's not being powerful. Begin to think now, live making choices. Why do you eat that crazy, dark, fast food? Why do you eat that stuff or why do you live a certain way? Make powerful choices. Why do you just get up in the day and just go about your day instead of slowing down and reading the Bible and living a powerful, self-reflective, intentional life? And that's really what the essence of this Hebrews is to tell them, hey, look, think about what you're doing. And the realization, the whole issue of hearing and then believing and embracing it, assigning validity and importance to it, and then drifting away from it. That's a recurring theme in the book of Hebrews. They did believe, they had embraced it, but they've got to hold on to it. Pay attention. Closer attention. God had mentioned, in the writer of Hebrews mentioned that God had spoken to us by various means in times past in chapter 1. In various different ways, but today, he says in chapter 1, he says more recently, he has spoken to us by Jesus Christ. Whoa, he used to speak through all these various ways, now in Jesus Christ. And of course, Hebrews 1 establishes the superiority of Christ to Torah and the superiority of Christ to the angels or to the law. Now here we get this idea that we need to pay close attention to what we've heard, lest we drift away from it. Think about the word drift. It's not a sudden thing. It's just a slow drift. We don't want to drift away. Verse 2, for since the message declared by angels proved to be reliable, he's talking about the law and how the law came to the Israelites. It was delivered by the angels on Mount Sinai, and every transgression or disobedience received a just retribution. Verse 3, how shall we escape if we neglect such a great salvation? So it's like, man, the message of the past came with great authority, reliability, and every transgression was held accountable. How shall we escape if we neglect even something greater than that, a great salvation? It was declared at first by the Lord, and it was attested to us by those who heard. This is kind of like a sort of a rhetorical statement using the law and the Torah, something that would have been really familiar to those of the first century, whether they were Hebrew or whether they were Gentiles. They would have understood, believers would have understood the Old Testament writings. And then taking people's mind back to the idea that we have something superior now. And God isn't going to treat this lightly. He's going to treat it more seriously. Oh, he's going to treat this salvation more seriously. And this word neglect, it's a Greek term, speaks of dismissing something, having disregard for something. Kind of like 1 Timothy 4:14 when it says, do not neglect the gift you have. Well, don't neglect the gift that you have. Don't dismiss it. Don't disregard it. Don't neglect it. The gift you have, which was given you by prophecy when the council of elders laid their hands on you. You know, this neglect speaks of apathy or not caring enough about something that really ought to be cared about. The gospel of Jesus Christ. To not drift from it. What you heard, how you heard it, what was communicated, don't drift from it. To the Jewish believer, this is going to make sense. It's like a no-brainer, so to speak, for them, that God took the law seriously, and now we need to take this revelation given to us by Jesus Christ. He's telling them in the letter of Hebrews, you need to take this seriously. This commitment, this new revelation, this revelation of who Jesus Christ is, what Jesus Christ has done. And so anyone familiar, again, because their scriptures weren't what we have as scriptures. The early church, their scriptures were the Old Testament. And the Old Testament, they were familiar with the Old Testament and the law. It was a very good logical argument. He said, hey, you read and see how serious they took the law. Now realize how much more this greater, superior revelation. Jesus is superior to the law. He's superior to the angels. He's come and he's declared this revelation that's greater than the revelations that were given in the past. They're higher, they're superior. He's revealing the truth, and he's saying this truth, this reality that's portrayed in the gospel. Hey, pay attention to it. Pay close attention to it. And it's to be the guiding force in our life. Pay close. That word close, you know what that word close means? Close. Close attention. And here we go, a great salvation. Again, back to verse 3. How shall we escape if we neglect such a great salvation? It was declared at first by the Lord, and it was attested to us by those who heard. A great salvation. Well, when you see Jesus, when you understand Jesus, when see Jesus, when Jesus is revealed to you, like Jesus was revealed to me, the first time I really heard Jesus' voice. I mean, I had a belief in God. Like if someone asked, are you a Christian? I go, well, yeah, I'm not Buddhist. I'm not Muslim. What do you think? But if they said, do you believe in God? Yes, I believe in God. Of course I believe in God because, I believed in God. I believe God exists. I wasn't an atheist. I believed in God. But I didn't know Jesus Christ. When I met Jesus Christ and heard his voice for the first time, when I heard Jesus Christ say to me in 1982 in the Kansas Memorial Union, sitting there, a lost freshman at KU, had no idea what truth was, and I was like, man, you know what? I can't be a Christian. I can't do it. I've tried to be good. I can't be good. And I heard Jesus say to me, John, you're right. You can't. You can't. But if you trust me, I will do it. That's when I heard Jesus. That's when all of a sudden, boom, I met Jesus. I realized what Jesus had done. The gospel is about Jesus Christ doing for us what we can't do for ourselves. How much attention should you pay that? The sentiment is you might strive to be right. You might strive to, get ahead. You might be like, okay, I'm gonna make things better. Okay, but that's a lot different than I'm gonna put my life. I'm gonna trust Jesus. I'm gonna trust Him to do for me what I can't do for myself. And my life changed dramatically, birthed in my heart. That's this thing. What he's reminding him. The writer of Hebrews is trying to remind these believers of, like, do you not realize? Do you not remember what happened to you? You will see this in the coming chapters. Man, God birthed His Spirit inside of you. We sang this worship song, living water, rise up within me. Well, living water, rise up within me. What is that? From that bottled water I had earlier? No, it's the living water. It's the Spirit of God inside of us as He's birthed transformation in our heart. Come to life as we're paying attention to it, as we're listening, as what is God saying? And we're learning how to silence the noise to hear the signal. You have to hear the signal. You have to slow things down, and that's been a blessing, these last several months, because I've spent a lot of time looking out on my back porch, just staring at trees, looking at things, and just, you see constantly two paths before me. Self-pity, right? And you just, at 62, you should realize, I should know, self-pity, that's a damnable path to lead. That is a path that leads nowhere but to death, hell, and destruction. But there's a path that leads to life. To quiet my soul, God, what are you saying? What do you want? What are you doing? What's happening? And then God saying, I'll show you. Watch. And He popping up these relationships, people, all the time. I'm seeing people. I'm meeting people. I'm sharing my life. I'm sharing Jesus with them. I'm sharing these things about me. I'm hearing from them. I'm hearing a perspective that's different, but just amazing things. I'm rambling. See, the law couldn't do this. This is what the writer of Hebrews is saying. The law can't do this. The law won't lay its life down. The law didn't become flesh and die. The law can't do that. The law is not a human entity. It's not an entity. It's not living. Again, he's reinforcing the superiority of what? The superiority of who Jesus is. And I would say even the necessity of Jesus, of the revelation, is what this author now, through the rest of chapter 2 and beyond, is trying to say. He's going to talk about the necessity of the incarnation. That Jesus, He is the superior in who He is, but even beyond that, He became a human being. He became flesh and blood. And He walked around on the planet and He experienced the life that we are experiencing. He experienced. And the goal is, not only is He superior in nature, that He was not a created being, He became human. And He came to be human to such a degree that He calls us brothers. That's what this is about, the rest of Hebrews 2. It's talking about, wow, he not only can identify with us, but because He lived and He conquered and He was successful, when we get tempted, like He got tempted, when we get tempted, we can trust that He can come to our aid because He too was tempted and did not give in to the temptation. To me, that's powerful. Now, this is interesting. I started thinking about this, about temptation, as I begin to close. The temptation has this element that he's going into, the temptation to drift, or the temptation to do stuff you don't want to do, or whatever it is. I remember before I was a Christian, I never thought about temptation, right? I didn't get tempted. It was just living, right? Then you become a Christian and you get a conscience, and then you start having choices and you realize, whoa, that's not something I want to do. And what do you experience? Temptation to do something you don't want to do. But in the midst of it, we have a high priest, Jesus. This is what makes him more superior, is that Jesus Christ wants to change us in the midst of the temptation, to deliver us from the temptation through the power of the Holy Spirit in us, to bring about the transformation that is enlightened as we face this temptation. We find out through the temptation what are the things still in us needing transformation. And being tempted isn't a sign that you're not doing good or you're got a dark soul. It is a sign that you're in the process of transformation. You're on the right path. If you're experiencing temptation, you're on the right path, unless you're going towards temptation, unless you're on your way to the strip club. That's not, what I'm talking about. I'm talking about when you're living your life for Jesus and these things arise. And they bring to light what in you needs to be transformed. So, we can just see how what God is doing in our midst, and what God is doing in this book of Hebrews. He's trying to say, okay, wait, pay attention. Pay attention. And we have to see that paying attention isn't just a one-time deal on Sundays. We've got to be giving ourselves to living a life that is more full and more focused on understanding what God is saying, what God is speaking, and understand the difference between the signal and the noise. There's a lot of noise out there, a lot of things being said, a lot of things that are being true. But what is it that God wants you to pay attention to? That's the process of getting discernment to understand. Let's all stand up together.